What's up guys, this is Chris here from East Coast PC and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about Nvidia's upcoming RTX 4000 series of graphics cards, codenamed ADA Lovelace, and whether you should possibly be holding out upgrading your system for one of these upcoming RTX 4000 series graphics cards. Before we get started, if there's anybody who is not subscribed to the channel, please hit that subscribe button, drop a like, comment, do all that good YouTube stuff. It helps us out so much and we appreciate each and every one of y'all. So without further talk about, let's get started. Alright guys, so the first thing we got to be excited about for these new graphics cards is we should be getting significant upgrades in the VRAM department. So if many of you may already know that the recently released RTX 3090 Ti still had 24 gigabytes of VRAM, but the difference is it only used 12 memory chips instead of 24 memory chips. So it only had chips on the front side and not on the back side. My RTX 3090, since they are only 1 gigabyte little memory modules, they had to have 24 of them, 12 on the front side, 12 on the back side. That was part of the problem with all the overheating VRAM chips. There wasn't adequate cooling by the board partners that made these graphics cards. They should have had way better thermal pads. And when people were mining Ethereum and just doing all kinds of 3D rendering for long periods of time, the memory chips overheated and it caused a lot of problems. Like I have an active backplate on mine, basically a water-cooled sandwich on my RTX 3090. Well, hopefully we don't have to do that anymore with since they're making these higher density VRAM chips. So hopefully the RTX 4090 and all of the RTX 4000 series will use 2 gigabyte memory modules. So hopefully we don't need no more of the rear-sided memory. Now the other exciting part is they have 24 gigabits per second memory chips in development. Now Samsung announced probably about 3 months ago that they were developing their standard GDDR6 memory. They were sampling 20 gigabits per second and 24 gigabits per second to their partners. Now up until this point, Micron and their GDDR6X has been the fastest on the market and is still the fastest of any released graphics cards on the market. And now it's good news to hear that they are also developing 24 gigabits per second in that memory, and that should be ready in time for the RTX 4000 series of graphics cards. One other thing I want to debunk before we stop talking about memory chips here is it's going all around on the internet. For some reason, I don't know where people got this info from, but it's totally wrong information. I'm going to be putting a whole lot of this stuff that we're talking about on the screen, and I'm going to stop right about now on the bottom of this press release directly from Micron. It's from videocards.com, but the press release came directly from Micron. And at the bottom of this page, at the bottom of this page, VideoCards has put up a chart of comparing GDDR5X, GDDR6, and GDDR6X. And each one, they got more and more power efficient. So 6 is a little more power efficient than 5X, and 6X is a little more power efficient than 6. And that only applies if the memory is running at the same speed. I think a lot of this confusion came because you got AMD cards with I'm gonna just say G6 memory so it'll be shorter. You got AMD cards with G6 memory running at 16 gigabits per second. Then you got Nvidia cards with G6X memory running at 19 and 19.5 gigabits per second. Well, that's a lot faster, and yes, that's probably going to consume more power by the time you get up to that speed. But if you have G6 running at 16 gigabits per second and you have G6X running at 16 gigabits per second, the 6X consumes less power. Along with needing faster memory for the 3000 series of cards that we have out now, when G6X first got developed, Nvidia worked with Micron so that they not only could develop faster memory, but they also wanted to make a way for it to be more power efficient, and that's what they used the PAM4 signaling for. That was the whole purpose of the PAM4 signaling, to make the faster memory more power efficient. So hopefully that helps out, guys. All of the G6 memory that AMD uses and the 6X memory that Micron uses, both are great solutions. 6X is a little more power efficient at that said speed, and that's about it for the memory. So now let's get to talking about the specifications that everybody wants to know all about. All right, guys, before we start talking about the specifications of these GPUs, one of the most important things is Moore's Law is dead has confirmed from his sources that Nvidia should be using what they call the 4N process node from TSMC. Now, this is very, very big news. Now, that is a cutting edge node. And before we thought they were using TSMC's Node 5. And we do know that AMD is supposedly using a combination of TSMC Node 6 and Node 5. Supposedly, like, some of the controllers are going to be Node 6 and the actual GPU dies are going to be Node 5. We know that their high-end Navi 31 architecture is going to be chiplet based. So it's going to be, Nvidia is going to have a very uphill battle competing against that with a monolithic die. Now, it seems like they are throwing everything they got at it, and it makes sense that they would try to go for this 4N process. Now, TSMC has a lot of different nodes in their Node 5 family. They have N5, which stands for Node 5, N4 for Node 4, then they have N4P, and they are developing, I think, the newest one is N4X. Now, a lot of times Nvidia will get a node that's slightly optimized and custom made for them, like they did with Samsung, where it's called 8N and the N after it, assuming that's for Nvidia. So supposedly they're going to be using something called the 4N process, and I'm assuming that is their TSMC's Node 4 with some special optimizations for Nvidia. I know that they had there was a lot of leaked information that they had spent a lot of money to allocate a crap ton of capacity for this generation for the 5nm family. And then later on, I reckon it was about 6 months later, we heard that they had spent even more money to ensure that they had the absolute best cutting edge nodes that TSMC could offer them. And that makes perfect sense with Moore's Law is dead sources saying that Nvidia is going to be built on the TSMC 4N process. So now that that's out of the way, we'll talk about some specifications. All right, guys, so this article that I got right here is from semianalysis.substack.com. Basically, I don't know much about this website, but I'm just using this chart here. It's one of the best charts that I found online, and it's comparing all the proposed specs of the new RTX 4000 ADA Lovelace cards compared to our current RTX 3000 Ampere generation of graphics cards. It's one of the best charts I found, so that's what I'm going to put up on screen for you guys to look at. And also credit to Kopite7Kimmy. He's the one that's leaking the majority of all this information that all these websites are getting. You know, he's just been leaking RTX stuff all the way back from he was leaking RTX 3000 series of cards way before they were ever coming out. He's been leaking the stuff for RTX 4000 for, my God, probably for over a year now. And also credit to Moore's Law is dead. We're going to talk about him a little bit later when we talk about the process nodes of these new cards. But anyway, guys, the current generation RTX 3090 Ti that just got released a few weeks ago, it uses the total GA102 die. Now that has 10,752 CUDA cores, 84 streaming multiprocessors. Okay, the new AD102 die for the ADA Lovelace architecture, it is going all the way up to 18,432 CUDA cores and 144 SEMs. Now, I got a feeling the RTX 4090, that will probably use somewhere like 140 SEMs or 142 SEMs. It'll probably be cut down just a little bit. You know, it's one of the first cards released probably. So that'll be just under 18,000 CUDA cores or slightly over 18,000 CUDA cores. That is a lot. That is a massive upgrade in CUDA core count, all the way from 10,000 to 18,000. We should be seeing massive performance gains. We know that this architecture will come with a very large L2 cache. The top die, the 102 die that we're talking about here, is supposed to have 96 megabytes of L2 cache. And it's going to probably work similarly to AMD's Infinity cache. It'll probably work a little different because it's L2 cache. But that should definitely help out in memory bandwidth. It's just going to help out in a lot of ways. And according to Kopite7Kimmy, when the Hopper part of this generation got canceled, so originally, from what everybody said, we were supposed to get 88 Lovelace along with Hopper, and Hopper was going to serve as some of the highest end SKUs. But after that got canceled, Jensen, the CEO for Nvidia, has decided to integrate as much of that technology into the 88 Lovelace architecture as he could, obviously because AMD is going to be bringing some awesome GPUs this generation. There's going to be awesome competition. One of the biggest things I want to talk about here, though, guys, I'm going to try to make this segment as short as I can, though. We're not going to talk about each individual SKU. I'll put it up on the screen so you guys can look at it. But from what Copite 7 Kimmy is saying, instead of them using the 102 die for the 80 series, which should be called the 4080, they're going to be using the 103 die. So, and there is a massive difference in CUDA core count from the 102 die from the 103 die. Now, as I said a while ago, the 102 die has 18,432 CUDA cores. Well, you go down to the 103 die, it only has 10,752, the exact amount that our current generation 3090 Ti has. Now that is a massive difference. I heard about a SKU online that was going to have 14,000 CUDA cores, so that leads me to believe that will probably be a 4080 Ti. And probably what they will do, if I had to guess, that probably won't be released at launch, unfortunately, because what they'll probably try to do, they'll probably release the 4090 along with the 4080, and there's going to be they're going to try to make a bigger performance gap this generation than they did last generation. And unfortunately, if we want the best when it first comes out, everybody's going to probably have to shell out. I've heard the price tag for these 4090s is going to be $1,899, and that's MSRP. And then later on, after they make a crap load of money, they'll probably release a 4080 Ti, and that'll be a lot cheaper. So that would make sense if they used the 102 die for 2 SKUs, around 18,000 for the 4090, around 14,000 and some change for the 4080 Ti. And if guys, I don't know how many of you know, but this last generation, the 3090 Ti, the 3090, the 3080 Ti, the 3080 12 gig, and the 3080 10 gig. That's 5 SKUs that were all made with the 102 die. That's way too many. We don't want that. That causes problems with die allocation and stuff like that. So that's what I think they're going to do. I think we're going to have a pretty big gap in between the 4080 and the 4090 this time. Supposedly that 103 die comes with a 256-bit bus, so that should mean 16 gigabytes of memory. Hopefully the 2 gigabyte modules, 8 on the front side, to equal 16 gigabytes on the 4080, and that would mean probably 24 gigabytes of RAM on the 4090. And what I think they'll do with the 4080 Ti is they will probably cut down that top die to a 320-bit bus, have 20 gigabytes of VRAM, and about 14,000 CUDA cores, and that would make perfect sense. So if you want to read the rest of the information or the specifications for the rest of the dies on here for the 4060, the 4070, all that good stuff, Copite 7 Kimmy, like I said, is saying that the 104 die is actually going to be used for the 4070, and the 103 die is going to be used for the 4080. So that's probably what's going to happen. It makes sense for them to try to segment it a little bit different than they did this last generation. But that about wraps things up, guys. Like I said, pause, do your homework on the slides that I put up on the screen if you want to. Now we're going to talk about the big elephant in the room, which is power consumption that so many people are worried about, and rightfully so. All right, so about this power, guys, what we do know is that, according to the leaks anyway, that all of Nvidia's upcoming RTX 4000 series should be using the new PCI Express 5.0 compliant 16-pin power connector, which can supply up to 600 watts of power. Now, just like we've been doing, I'm going to put some of this stuff on screen here from videocards.com so y'all can take a look at this yourself. But one thing I do want to note, the RTX 3090 Ti from EVGA, the For the Win 3 card, it actually has solder points for an additional 16-pin power connector. It only used one 16-pin for the 3090 Ti, but I do think that some of these extremely high-end RTX 4090s could use two 16 pins. I know that's a lot of power, and I understand why people are really worried about it. But one thing I do want to note, I don't think the rest of the lineup is going to be extremely like power hungry enough to cause that many issues. I do think the 4090 is going to use a lot of juice. From everything we know, the TDP of the RTX 4090 seems pretty set in stone at this point. It seems like it's going to be 600 watts. Now, if that's the standard TDP or TGP, if you want to call it the exact correct name, if that's the exact TGP or the base specification, then our third-party cards like the 40Win3s and the Asus Strixes, they are going to go higher than that. So the most that you can get out of 116 pin is 600 watts. We can also get 75 watts from the PCI Express slot. Now, that's only 75 watts higher than the base specification, and as we know, a lot of these custom cards, such as my RTX 3090, pushes a lot further than that. I have a 500 watt BIOS installed on my 3090. Even though I'm cooling it with water now, it had absolutely no problem cooling it with air. The only problem with the memory chips could have been solved if we used high performance thermal pads on it, but of course they didn't do that. So what I'm thinking is the highest end RTX 4090s, they will probably use about 750 watts. That's a lot. That'll be your very high end custom cards, maybe a little bit more than that. But what that will require is, if this chart that I'm going to put on screen, the 16 pin power connector can operate in 4 different modes. It can operate in 150 watt mode, 300 watt mode, 450 watt mode, and 600 watt mode. And for the RTX 4090, what we will probably see is, say like a Asus Tough card or something like that. All them cards and the Founders Edition, they'll probably all get away with 116 pin. And how that'll work is, that'll require 4 8 pins if you're using an older power supply. That'll require 4 8 pins, which I know is a lot even for the 116 pin. 4 8 pins to go to 116 pin, and then it can get 75 watts from the slot. So that gives it 75 additional watts from the base specification, you know, to do a little bit of overclocking and get more performance from. Now, cards like the 40Win3s and the Asus Strixes and the MSI Supreme X's, all that good stuff, they'll probably need more than that, so they'll have to use 2 16 pins. But they won't, that don't mean we'll have to use 8 pin power adapters or power cables. What that'll probably mean is they'll probably operate in 450 watt mode instead of 600 watt mode. So you'll need actually 6 8 pins. Like my 1200 watt power supply, it has 6 8 pins. It has 2 for the CPU and then 6 8 pins for the GPU. So that's probably what that will require, and then it can get all of its power from the 2 16 pins. And it won't even use all of that power. That would get a total of 900 watts. I definitely don't think none of the cards will push it that far. We might see something like that in the future. I can't predict exactly where they'll land, but I do think 600 watts is probably gonna be the specification for the RTX 4090, and I do think the custom cards are gonna push a little bit further than that. Now, the better news for most people who aren't buying 4090s, which is most of the gaming community, I don't think that the 4080 and the 4070 is going to be that power hungry. Again, we're using a lot of information from Copike7 Kimmy, and he has leaked that the RTX 4080 series of cards, probably the RTX 4080 itself, the 4080 Ti will probably be much higher, but the 4080 is said to have a TGP around what GA102 is, which is 350 watts. Now, let's just say they pushed it a little further to 400 watts. 350 or 400 watts for the new 80 series card, if it's significantly more performance than the RTX 3080, then, you know, I don't think that's that big of a deal. I think we're probably looking at about a 370, I'm just roughly guessing here. Let's go in the middle of 350 and 400. Let's just say 375 watts for the 4080, 275 watts for the 4070. I don't think that's that big of a deal. I think it's only going to be the very top cards, the 4090s and the 4090 Ti's, that are doing everything they can to compete with AMD's chiplet architecture. That's what they're going to push very far. We're going to get an RTX 4090 here at East Coast PC as soon as we can on the channel to test it out, to see exactly how much power it's using. I'm very excited about it, but we still got a while to wait before we get there. So that's about what we know about the power, guys. They all should use 16 pin connectors, and I don't think the rest of the lineup is going to be that bad in power consumption. I think it's only going to be the highest end, so let's try not to, you know, get too upset about it. I don't think it's going to be that big a deal for most people. For the people that are buying the RTX 4090s, be prepared. Make sure you're not pulling too much power out of that wall socket, and make sure you have an adequate power supply. Probably 12 or 1300 watt power supply is what I would recommend, which is absolutely insane to think about, but yes, that's where we are. So that's out of the way, guys. We're going to recap this whole thing, talk about everything, and whether I think if you should try to upgrade your card now if you've been holding out, because cards are literally near MSRP levels for AMD and Nvidia. It's a great time to buy, but it could also be a bad time to buy with the new cards on the very near horizon. So let's talk about that. All right, so here's what we know, guys. Both Nvidia and AMD are going to be using great process technology to build their cards on, from TSMC 5 and 6 nanometer for AMD, hopefully 4 nanometer for Nvidia, from what Copite 7 Kimi and Moore's Law is Dead is both saying. So we know that both companies are going to be producing great graphics cards, great performance. We don't know exactly where each card is going to fall, but we do know we should be seeing some massive performance gains this generation. Now, when it comes to the subject of whether you should upgrade if you've been holding out, that's a decision that ultimately you'll have to make. The best advice I can give you is, how bad is it going to affect you if we get the next generation and we see a massive stock supply shortage like we did this generation? Now, mining has cooled down a lot because Ethereum is supposed to be moving to a proof of stake model, which means it will not be able to be mined on graphics cards like it traditionally has for all these years. Now, there will always be different cryptocurrencies that will be mineable, like Ravencoin. A lot of people will try to move over to that, but it's just not going to be the same. The market cap is not the same, and there's no way that me or anybody else can really predict what's going to happen with the stock situation. I do think that it's going to be a lot better. What I can tell you is that every time a new generation comes out, the 10 series, the 20 series, the 30 series, for the first minimum of 2 to 3 weeks, probably at least for the first month, the cards are going to be generally hard to get your hands on. After that, if there's no other kind of stock shortage, hopefully things will be better, but I can't guarantee that, and nobody else can either. So if you know you need a card and you can get a card for around MSRP now, and it's a good deal, say RTX 3080, or if you're going for a lower end card, something like the RTX 3060 Ti, or AMD's RX 6600 is literally like available at MSRP at Newegg. It's really crazy how fast the prices have dropped in the past, I would say, 60 days overall. So if you do need a card and you have been holding out, it might be a good time to go ahead and grab one. Also, if you do have backup cards and it's no big deal to you, you don't need to upgrade now, I would definitely recommend waiting. We're supposed to see massive gains this upcoming generation. But one thing I will tell you, I built a computer for a good friend of mine about 4 months before the RTX 3000 series of graphics cards came out, and Nvidia was just stopping. They were starting to slow down production of the RTX 20 series, and I said, you know what, he didn't have to have a computer right then, but he was really ready to build. He said he could wait the 4 months for the new cards to come out, but I was really worried that I'd be able to get my hands on one of them cards, and I'm glad that I did end up getting him that RTX 2070 Super, because if I hadn't have, it would have probably been at least 10 to 12 months before I would have been able to get a card for myself and him together. Micro Center's 5 hours away from me, so I was left fighting with everybody else on the internet for cards, and that's what I usually have to deal with. So if you think you need a card now, go ahead and get one if they're around MSRP. If you can hold out, I would definitely recommend doing that. But that about wraps this video up, guys. Thank each and every one of y'all for watching this video. If there's anybody who isn't subscribed, please hit that subscribe button, drop a like, comment, do all that good YouTube stuff. Thank each and every one of y'all for all y'all support. Thank my princess for filming this video, and we will see you guys later.